people might ask why we need a framework around elder abuse for the OPAN group. I know a number of people have asked me. The framework is a how you go about prevention and addressing, but I'd just like to speak briefly about the why. Elder abuse, as most of you know, is a terribly complex issue, and it requires, because of that complexity, a whole range of expertise and input. So OPAN is only one of multiple players in this elder abuse landscape, and they're very well aware of that. So one of the things you'll notice as you go through the framework is a very strong emphasis on collaboration. You need to work across sectors and across organisations. There is not a single organisation or sector who could do this on their own. And in particular, we're very interested in partnerships across the health, aged care and legal sectors, as that video would have just demonstrated for you. We also were looking for, and I say we because I'm not OPAN, I was just their scribe, but we worked together as a group, and I do feel as if I was part of the group on that part of the journey. It was very clear that you've got 8 very different organisations from different jurisdictions, and they're all extremely different. They varied in the level of experience they'd had in working with elder abuse. 2 of the organisations, Advocare and Age Rights Advocacy Service in South Australia, had a very long track record in this space, but with funding from their respective state governments. But they brought that to the table. Also in the OPAN group were organisations with a lot of expertise in working with different special needs groups as defined under the Act. So how do you get national consistency with such diversity? That was really a very big challenge, to have a framework that allowed that kind of consistency but had enough flexibility so that jurisdictional and even local differences had room to move. We were also influenced by the review that I did that the Minister mentioned in 2017 with funding from his department. And that review was quite telling, because I interviewed people, obviously not just from OPAN, but from across the elder abuse landscape. And, you know, one of the things that really struck me was how many multiple hats most of those people and their organisations wore, partly because of multiple funding sources, but there's huge crossover. So if you look at our peak body groups like the new EAAA and OPAN and OPALS, you will find people are members of more than one of those. What was really gratifying to see as a reviewer was how well people communicate with each other and how much knowledge and resources are being shared. Because the thing that unifies people, and it particularly unified the OPAN group, is a huge commitment to changing the abuse of older people, and to not have the kind of circumstances that we saw on those videos. And you only have to watch one of those videos to be motivated to change that. So what we did was look at, this is a ground-up framework, not a top-down framework. There was an awful lot of knowledge and expertise and experience, not just within the OPAN group, but with the groups they collaborate with. And the Minister mentioned the mapping that's in the appendix. Just bear in mind that mapping is fluid. It almost changes from week to week. It was a snapshot in time, but it serves to illustrate how many players and sectors are really needed to work effectively. So, I've lost my spot now because I haven't looked at what I've written. We looked at the benchmarks that we had with ARIS and Advocare and other specialist members in the OPAN group. And we said, well, what have we learned from their first-hand experience? It was the chance in doing this review, the review and the development of the framework, for people to step back and reflect. And by talking to each other to say, well, this worked, but this didn't work, so let's go with this, and then how do we tweak it for our jurisdiction? So there was a terrific number of conversations, particularly over the past year, to sort out what people would like to go with. And if you look at the structure of the framework, you'll see that it begins with underpinning principles, and these were very much the starting point. All of the OPAN group We're united in the broader approach that exists in the elder abuse landscape, to begin with a human rights position, which is also reflected in the United Nations approach. And, you know, if you look not just nationally but internationally, that is really consistent. And I think when you've got people who are singing from the same song sheet when it comes to values and philosophy, you've got a very, very solid foundation. So the next layer was the experience that people had. And if you look at how the framework's structured, you'll see that it goes beyond those principles and it looks at the whole spectrum from prevention to response and including early intervention. You will see there's a special section on data set. This is one of the, I think, things that people are going to see in a year or so's time that's going to have a very powerful impact as a result of this framework because, again, the OPANs had to look at all of the different data that they produced and how they went about it and then say, what can we work with? What you'll see is that there are two levels within that framework. One's called core data and one's called optional data. For the first 12 months, we're going to monitor the data set and see if it works and what doesn't work and what kind of story it tells us. But it will mean that for the first time, OPAN can provide a national quantified picture of need and demand, and it can be very granulated around what type of people, what type of abuse did they experience, and so forth. This has been tricky to develop. It's a little like herding cats, really, but it was fine in the long run. Have a look at that when you look at the appendix. It's the whole set is there in the appendix. The last lot of points that I would just like to make is that we've got a section at the end that's, I think, hopeful. It's about capacity building and innovation. And what it's saying really is that this framework is a moving piece. It's not static. We've written it for now, but it's probably going to evolve over time, responding to other initiatives going on in the broader elder abuse landscape, as well as within the OPAN network itself. But innovation is critical to going forward. We can't keep doing things in the old way. The other issue that people are going to grapple with in applying the framework, and which we grappled with in designing the framework, is finding that very tricky balance between protection and empowerment. And I don't have the answers to that, and no one does, but very skilled advocates will be steering a course between those two poles constantly. I think, other than saying that, if you notice in the appendix, OPAN have agreed on a number of protocols and strategies for delivering elder abuse services, and these, we think, will be a very useful technique for ensuring consistency of approach. I think that's all I need to say for now.